Welcome to a training video of the Export Taxes screen in PayPak Professional 4.0. This screen is used to create data files which would then be edited and imported as fixed tax entries, which is often done when creating year-to-date batches. So let's sign in and show you how it works. The Export Taxes screen is found under the Export section of the menu, beside Export Gross Pay and Export Deductions. We click on the button, and here is the screen. This screen would be used primarily for creating data files, which will be used to import tax entries, fixed tax entries for year-to-date batches. It's similar to the features in Export Gross Pay and Export Deductions. And the data file which it creates would be imported using the Import Taxes screen. Now, this screen, along with the Export Deductions and the Export Gross Pay, work in a very similar fashion. They all have their respective training videos, and you're encouraged to have a look at them. So let's start with a look at the layout of this screen. Then we'll show you how it works. At the top left, you have Export From options. You can export from the employee taxes, which are the taxes in the employee profile, or you can export from a template. You can also choose both. To the right of that, you have options for selecting the employees who would be in this data file. You can choose all employees. Right now we have 44 employees. You can choose by category, and if I chose the category, so I chose cook, there are 10 cooks that I could choose from. I could choose all of them or some of them or none of them. I could choose by department, and we have 2 departments to choose from. There's Oistins with 24 employees, and there's One Terrace with 20 employees. I can also choose by payroll set, and there's a number of payroll sets here. There is one called the year-to-date test, which was specially created for this demo, and that's the one we will go with. You also have the option of choosing whether you want active employees or all employees. We'll go with active. Under the selection options, there's a format section, and there are 4 formats. There's Excel 2007, Excel 2003, comma separated, CSV, and tab delimited, which is TXT. I would recommend, if you are creating this file manually, to edit it so that you import the taxes to a batch, or for year-to-date batches, whatever your requirement is, that you use Excel. Use one of the Excel formats. Excel is the easiest format to use if you want to edit the files. The other formats will work as well, but if you have a large number of employees to be edited, the comma separated and tab delimited formats, they're not the easiest human readable formats to use. You can easily make errors or mistakes while editing them, and modify the format of the file, and that can interfere with your information when you try to import. You can get errors when you try to import it. They can be there's an option in Excel which allows you to open and read CSV files, and maybe tab delimited ones too, or you can have other programs that can do that, and if you can do that and save them back in the original format, all well and good, but Excel is probably the easiest option for you to use with PayPak 4. There's an option to the right as to whether to add data headers or not, and because you will be editing this file and then importing it, you have to make sure that the settings you make in this screen, both for the format and the headers option, as well as these column options here, match the settings you're making in the export taxes screen. Under the format, there is a payment number, and the reason for this is you can have a file created, or you can be importing to a batch which contains more than one set of tax entries or payments, and the payment number, which is 1, would default normally for payment 1. If you can have a batch with 2 payments in it, suppose you created a year-to-date batch and you had entries for 2019 and entries for 2020 for the same person. The entry for 2019 could be payment 1 and the entry for 2020 could be payment 2. So this payment setting controls which payment entries are to be updated with these fixed tax entries. And note that they're fixed tax entries. They're not tax entries in the conventional manner where you apply taxes to gross pay to calculate tax. When you're calculating a batch, when you're preparing a gross pay batch, the gross pay batch would have totals for your gross pay split into pay rates and totals for your taxes divided by the, split by the particular tax or tax category. Typically in a year-to-date batch, you would not be applying the taxes to the gross pay. You are recreating what has already been calculated in some other program, maybe an Excel spreadsheet, maybe another software package, before you started using PayPak Professional for your payroll. Year-to-date batches, of course, would be in a case where you may have started using PayPak, say, middle of June 2021, and you have batches prior to that. Sometimes it can be from January to May of 2021. You wish to have those year-to-date taxes and the year-to-date totals, gross pay taxes and deductions, you wish to have them in your payroll so that your payslip would show the year-to-date, the correct year-to-date totals, also for purposes of tax reporting and sometimes also for severance pay calculation. You may also want to have year-to-date totals for a prior year, such as the totals for 2020 or 2019. Okay. At the top right, you have a cluster of totals for the employees and the taxes, depending on what you select. Under that, you have 3 panels, and one is for the employees, one is for the taxes, and you have the export columns. Now you'll note as I move from the employees to the taxes, whichever one I highlight, the asterisk marks that particular grid. And the reason for that is these buttons at the bottom, the all, none, and invert, they will apply to whichever grid was last selected. So when the asterisk is on taxes, these apply to the taxes. When the asterisk is on the employees, they apply to the employees. That does not include the export columns. That's a different type of grid in this case. So we have the employees, these are the ones from the selected payroll set, and I can choose some of them, none of them, all of them if I wanted. I then have the taxes, and these are the taxes which will be, there'll be lines for each of these taxes in the import file. I could turn on or off any of these as I wished. Then we have the export columns. And how the export columns work is these are columns of the data file. Some of these cannot be turned off. You can't turn off the employee name, you can't turn off the employee ID, you can't turn off the employee number, you can't turn off the payment, you can turn off the tax ID, and you can turn off the tax, the category ID, the tax category ID. You probably would not want to do that. And you have taxable employee amount and employer amount. Now, the purpose of this screen is to create the file which will have these columns. When you turn off the tick for a column, the column is still created in the export file, in the data file, but the information in this case, which would come from the, if you're choosing employee taxes, where that information is in the employee profiles. If you turn these off, it does not import the values from the employee profile. If you turn them on, it will bring over the values from the employee profile. And if you're doing a year-to-date batch, you probably want these turned off because the profile will show what that person works for in a single pay period, whether it's monthly or weekly or fortnightly or whatever the case, or twice a month. They may not even have fixed taxes at all, actually. But these come from the employee tax options. This information is sourced from the employee tax options section of the employee profile. If you are doing year-to-date totals, you want these figures blank because those are the columns which you are going to fill in. And this export columns applies both to whether you're getting the information from the employee gross pay, which is employee taxes, sorry, the employee profile, which is the employee taxes, or whether you're doing as a template. With the template, you would choose which fields you want. So you would say, like, payment is number 1. My category is, let's say I wanted to fill in income tax $250 weekly, and there's a column for the taxable, a column for the employee amount, and a column for the employer amount. I could fill those in there and put default amounts in there, but probably not. You would do that. Normally you would do that at the point when you are editing the data file, which is created by this process. Now, if I chose income tax $250 weekly, and I include the category, that means that for the selected employees, it would have a line for $250W for everyone. If you're doing a year-to-date batch, there may be employees who are not $250W, so you may prefer to set this to none when you're exporting the file as a template, and when as you reach each employee's line, you then fill out the correct tax code and category code. In this case, we are for this demo, we are going to export 2 sets of files. We could export them together. I'm going to export them separately. I will export from the employee taxes to let you see how that works, and then I'll export from the template to let you see how that works. In this particular database, we have a tax called Fortress Pension, which is really not a tax, but that is a pension deduction which is set up under the taxes section of the software to make calculation of the employee portion and the employer portion easier. I'm going to select all of these employees for this payroll set year to date. I'm going to select all the taxes as well. Now, as I said before, if you look at the asterisk, if you look at these two sections, the asterisk would indicate which grid is currently selected. So these buttons are currently set for taxes. So if I had said none, they all go off, the taxes all go off. If I had said, let's put these two back. If I had said invert, it would invert here. If I had said none, it's none here for the taxes. If I said all, it's the taxes here. If I move over to the employees, invert will invert the employees list. None will select no one from the employees list, and all will select again the employees list. So that's what we want for this demo. We want all of the employees, all of the taxes, and these are the settings for the export columns for the data file. Now, I am going to create a set of data files for the employee exporting from the employee taxes. I'll turn the template option off for now. I could have done both together, but I want you to see them separately. And for each export, I'm going to export each of these formats. So there'll be an Excel 2007 file, an Excel 2003, a comma separated, and a tab delimited. When you're doing this in real life, you would choose only one format, and that will be the format that you use for exporting and importing. You have to use the same format going and coming. Now, we've got Excel 2007. We've got our employees, our taxes, and our columns sorted out. We click on the export button, and this is the folder. It's saved to import gross pay. Let's go to import taxes instead, and I'm going to call this employee taxes. I'll just call it employee, EMPLOY, so that I know it comes from the employee profile, because otherwise it would save it with the same name. I would not be able to distinguish the ones which are from the employee taxes and the ones which were from the template. So I'm using employee taxes as the name of the file. You can use whatever name you prefer. If you were exporting taxes for the year 2019, you could say taxes 2019, because you may have a separate file for each year you're doing the taxes for. That's done. I now go to the Excel 2003. I export that. Again, I put employee, save that, and the file is created, XLS file. Then we go for the comma separated CSV, export that, employees, space, save that one. It's done, much faster than the Excel options. Tab delimited TXT, export, and again, employee taxes TXT. So those are 4 files created from the employee taxes, from the employee profiles. Now, I wish to now export using the template. And in this case, I'm going to set my default. I want to do income tax. Let's say I want to do income tax. Let's say I wanted income tax and national insurance. I want those two. I'm not interested in the pension, in the Fortress pension in this case. So I would go with national insurance. Let's say most of my people are private sector weekly. And I want another line for income tax at 250W. Okay, that's where most of them are. If there are any, I would change. This information would probably come from the previous payrolls, and it would indicate what each person's tax category is. And if it's not 250, we'd change it to 250 as we are editing the file. So our defaults are going to be national insurance and income tax. Okay. For the purpose of the demo, I will not include the Fortress, although I could have done that if I so desired. So we're going to export again, and it's the same process. You choose Excel 2007, we export, and we say template, taxes so that we know that this is from the template. This is the one done before, which was the employee taxes from the employee profile. And it's finished. Then we go for the Excel 2003, export again, template, save. Third one, CSV format, export, template, and save. And finally, the tab delimited, export, template, and that will save the txt file. So I have created 8 data files which can then be edited to input the information that needs to be imported. Let's have a look at those files. And this is one for the gross pay. Let's go to the taxes one. And these are my 8 files. So let's have a look first of all at the employee ones, the employee taxes. Double click. Remember, this is the Excel format, Excel 2007, and let's compare that to the template one. So I dock this to the right, the template one, and we dock the employee one to the left. Now, these files will have the same exact layout. You've got the employee name, which is that's there only for reference. It doesn't matter what the name is. What matters is the employee ID. It must have the employee ID or the employee number. That's required for importing purposes. This particular database did not use employee numbers. That's why this column is blank. Same over here. Then you have the payment number 1. Then you have the tax ID and the category ID. And as I said, these are my defaults. If I had wanted to, suppose this person was a 275W, I could come here and put 275W and the change is made. Okay. The taxable column, you can enter a figure there. So if your figures show that the person had a taxable pay, and this is an optional field by the way, if they had a taxable pay of $75,000 for the year, you would put that there, just widen that. This is NIS, and let's say that the amount was 7658.23 for the employee, and for the employee it was 8100.13. There's how you would enter it. So that's the employee's NIS total for the year-to-date period, the employer amount of that. For the PAYE, of course, there's no employer portion, and if the PAYE total, let's say it was on the same 75,000, was the taxable figure, you could enter that there again. As I point out, that is optional. And if the PAYE which they paid on that was, they had 4658.23, that's what you would enter in the case here. So you would enter the information for each employee. Let's maximize this a bit so you can see the names as you enter it. You would enter this in the same manner for each person. If the Fortress pension was on 75,000 and there was 1,800 for the employee and 1,600 for the employer, that's how it would be done. And so on and so forth. So you got NIS again. This person 68,529.89 and theirs was 7124.55, and the employer's portion of the NIS was 7233.21, and the PAYE was also on the 68,529.89, and their PAYE happened to be 3502.22. Right, so you get the idea of how the files would be edited. When you're done, you just save the file and you continue in the same manner. Now, the template one is the same thing, but remember, for the template one, I only have 8 lines, unlike the 12 lines here, because for the template, I did not choose the Fortress Pension option. I only chose the National Insurance and the PAYE. But you would enter the information in the same manner. You key in your totals and you save the information as needed. So it will be the same 75,000 here, 7658.23, 8100.13. I could widen this. Let's bring this column in a bit so you can see what's on the other side. Then the next person, the next tax, sorry, 75,000 and 4658.23, 1800 and 1600. So this is how you would, sorry, that was the Fortress Pension. I want to make this the 68,529.89. So this is how you would edit those files if you were entering, in this case, year-to-date totals. You could also be doing it for an individual batch. There's nothing stopping you from doing that if you needed to do it for a batch in the current period. You wanted taxes which were manually calculated as opposed to taxes calculated by the software. Sometimes customers may have special bonus batches or whatever, and they want to calculate a manual amount of tax. In this case, if you have a large number of employees and it's tedious to make those entries one by one, you could very easily create the spreadsheet, enter your totals, and then import it into PayPak. Right, so there you go. Now you would keep the format of this file exactly as it appears. Do not add any other columns. Don't insert any other columns when you're doing the editing. All you do is fill out what needs to be filled out and save it. You have to make sure that these are valid columns, are valid codes in the software for taxes that are already set up. If we had not exported these two columns, the tax ID and the category ID, these would have been blank, and you'd have the responsibility of filling them out and making sure that these are valid codes, such as if this was 275W, for example, and 275W was not set up in the PAYE for this database, you'd get an error when you try to import it, and you'd have to set up the tax category and then import again. So that's how you would edit the files in Excel. Now I'm going to show you some of the other formats, the other file formats, so that you can get an idea of what they're like. The CSV format looks like this. Okay, this is it for the employee taxes, the one which came from the employee profile, and this is it for the template. As you can see, very similar, but these are probably not the best, the most human readable format or human editable, because if you choose this format and you wish to edit this manually, you have to be very careful about the placement of these commas. The information goes in. This is the column for the taxable, this is the column for the employee portion, this is the column for the employer portion. You have the names there to guide you, but you have to be very careful with this. Another thing about the import files is that you can insert lines as well. You shouldn't change the format of the columns or interfere with anything else, but you can insert lines both in the spreadsheets and in the text files as long as they're in the same format. And once you save them correctly without any problems, those entries will be imported. That is the CSV. We also have the TXT and the TXT, that's one here. That's what that looks like. This is for the template, and for the employee, the TXT looks like these here. And as I said, these are probably not the first choice you would want to make for editing the file, because if you interfere with the tab characters in here, you type something in the wrong way, you don't put the tabs in where they should go, or you key something in incorrectly, you will get errors importing the file. Excel is the best choice to go with for that. Alright, I believe that brings this portion of the demo to a close. Let's look at the two of them. Let's go back to the screen and have a look at some of the other options on there. The new button will clear the screen. We've looked at the all, none, and invert as far as it applies to the employees and the taxes. The settings button will save your settings, like which template you're using, the payroll set, etc., which option you're using for selection, and your format, and your the option for adding your or not having a data header. The reset button will clear your settings. The refresh button will update lists such as the list of categories or departments or payroll sets, etc., and the list of employees, of course. So that's it for this demo. As I said, there are other similar training videos for the export gross pay and export deductions, and I encourage you to have a look at them as well. So thank you for the time you spent sharing with us, and do look forward to the next video. Thank you and goodbye.